Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Echez. This week we're joined, can't get the words out, by Zach Lowy, who is the co-founder and lead writer of BreakingTheLines.com. Big fan of theirs and him himself, so it's fantastic to have him on. And he's joining us this week to talk all about the career of José Mourinho, how his time at Roma is going, and whether he'll enter the international scene or whether his best days are past him. So before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Wyfutbol_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Zach, it's taken a lot to actually get you here, not just in terms of messaging, but in terms of connection issues. So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Excited to be on, and yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. So I wanted to do this episode for a while for a variety of reasons. I know we spoke about it before. I think Mourinho is an incredible manager. He's changed, I think, the scope of European football during his time as a coach. But the latter half, I'm talking about Spurs and Man United, and maybe as well potentially Roma have not gone so well. So I thought it'd be a focusing kind of what's next for him, or whether he's got more to give in the tank, because every time you write off a aging manager, you have people like David Moyes who come roaring back, who's having a fantastic job at West Ham. So my first question to you would be: are you surprised by his slow start to life at FC Roma?
I'm not. I'm not surprised at all. I think that it's almost been a carbon copy of his past few jobs. For example, I mean, you saw how Roma started off the season pretty well, getting into the Europa Conference League.
Hmm.
Getting in some decent wins. Um, for like the first few weeks, and then I think they lost to um, Hellas Verona, I believe.
Hmm.
I think that was actually the loss that kickstarted it for Igor Tudor's side in his first game back, and yeah, and then you saw, of course, losing the Derby della Capitale, losing to Juve, the horrendous defeat to Bodo Glimt, losing to Milan and Venezia. So yeah, I have not been that surprised, and to be fair to Mourinho, um, it was going to be difficult with this Roma team. That this Roma team does need a lot of work, and I said at the start of the season that getting into the top four would be a very successful season. Would be a successful season for Mourinho, given Roma's recent history under likes of Paulo Fonseca. They have uh, their squad has declined obviously in recent years. Since finishing second and getting to the Champions League semifinal. A lot of poor moves in the transfer market, but it's also true that no team in Italy spent more, or at least had a higher net transfer spend than the Giallorossi, and that was really with Thiago Pinto, ex Benfica sporting director Thiago Pinto, basically allowing Mourinho to call the shots and working alongside him. Bringing in likes of Rui Patricio, Matias Vinha, Tammy Abraham, Eldor Shomurodov. Um, uh, I'm maybe missing one or two players, but this is a time where like pretty much every Italian side um weakened got weakened to a degree. Obviously Juventus lost Cristiano Ronaldo, Inter Milan losing like Achraf Hakimi, Romelu Lukaku. So to say that Mourinho like hasn't been backed, and that he's unlucky, I mean, I think that's a bit ridiculous, to be honest with you. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's Marino 101. Often he's one of, I think managers can be split into two categories. Ones which often complain behind the scenes of the small grumblings in terms of not getting the transfers they want. And Mourinho is probably a bit more vocal, and Antonio Conte also springs to mind actually as well. I know he's mentioned that a few times, so it's interesting to hear your point around, he has actually been backed, but the squad's actually weaker. So you're not surprised by his start, and neither am I, to be honest. But do you reckon it's going to end in tears for Mourinho, or could it be, there is a David Moyes Mark II in him, where he actually manages to get into the Champions League and has a successful year?
Um, I definitely don't see Mourinho leaving midway through the season. I think that Roma have made a big effort to bring him in. I think there's still a strong belief with the Friedkin Group ownership as well as Thiago Pinto that this is the right man for the job. And they are currently just what I think they're six right now. Um, so which is not it's not great. It's not bad either. But the fact is, I don't think there's any reason to sack him right now. But with that being said, Serie A has so many top managers. You see likes of Luciano Spalletti, Stefano Pioli, um, Simone Inzaghi, Gianpiero Gasperini. I'm a bit worried that if Mourinho is too outdated to compete with these managers. To be honest with you, it's people say that I hate Mourinho. That's ridiculous. I don't hate Mourinho. I think he's one of the greatest managers of all time. And so much off the sport. I think that his work with languages, his work with translation, he's been an absolute inspiration to so many people. I think that I've been in Lisbon for the past few weeks. I was speaking to Blessing Lumuemo, the youth coach at Estoril Praia, who just mentioned me that really Mourinho was the reason he got into coaching and started following his work and started writing. And eventually got a job as a Estoril. So he's absolutely been a massive inspiration. I mean, you see um, so many top Portuguese managers, nowadays. I mean, likes of Abel Ferreira, um, Paulo Fonseca, so many top young Portuguese managers, and I definitely think that Mourinho's influence uh, has played a massive part in that rise. But the fact is, if players can decline, so too can managers. So I don't know why it's controversial to say that Mourinho has declined as manager and why he's frankly outdated both in his tactics and his man management. Like I think like actually the other week, I was with Philip Michael, who's a real estate investor I interviewed for Breaking Lines, Rob Harris, the AP reporter, um, and Martin Braithwaite, and we were just
Mhm.
like chilling in this hotel lounge until like 4 a.m. And for like I forgot how it happened, but like the conversation turned to Mourinho, and Braithwaite was talking about like um he mentioned like I feel like it's a different guy, the guy who I like the guy who I grew up like idolizing, like not like who used to be like arguably the best manager in football, is just like he's like a completely different guy. He's like vanquished, and I feel like that's for me that's like a bit similar to my sentiment on Mourinho. I feel like just there's almost no remnant of that, you know?
Yeah, I can kind of see that to a degree. I think your point around managers can decline is something I've championed for a long time. I have a hypothesis that I believe, and I put my neck out on this, that very few managers top once they reach the pinnacle of their game. Very few stay at the top for more than a decade. If you do the eye test on quite a lot of managers to varying degrees of success, so okay, if I picked someone like Ancelotti, who has been very successful in his career, I would say that from when he reached his peak, that peak lasted for around 10 to 12 years. Obviously, I know he's managing at Madrid now, but he also was at Everton last season and the season before, and Napoli, which is different compared to the previous big Italian sides that he managed, or Arsene Wenger, or a fair few. There's obviously anomalies to that. So you can go and list Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, but it generally with Mourinho, when you look at that period from 2003, 2004, and you add 10 years, 10 years takes us to around the second stint at Chelsea when he had Diego Costa and he had Fabregas, and they won the league. Then Eden Hazard was magical, and then you could then compare. So that's 2015ish time to now. I haven't seen anything to really show me that okay, there's a renaissance of sorts. There's a comeback. If anything, especially with his time at Spurs, where it was like Harry Kane and Son, working magic and we'll just pray for the best. I haven't seen anything since that's going to show me that the Mourinho of old can still be effective. You use that word as well about his tactics and styles. I haven't really seen anything that says, okay, he can still be effective in the modern game. And the game is always evolving and moving ever so quickly. So you spoke about your adoration for him and like how good and inspirational he has been. What would you say your peak favorite Mourinho side has been? Is it the Porto side, the Chelsea team, Inter Milan, even the Real Madrid side when they went head to head with Pep?
If I'm completely honest, I think I'm too young to remember the Porto side.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. I would probably say the Real Madrid side was absolutely went like that 2011-2012 season, arguably the best counterattacking team ever. I would probably say Inter Milan. A lot of people don't know this, but my first ever football kit purchase was a Maicon shirt from that
Hmm.
Inter team. I just fell in love with it. It was just so much talent, so many talented players, like of Eto, um, Maicon, Cambiasa, Schneider, Lucio. Yeah, I absolutely love that team, and I wish he had stayed longer because I think that well, obviously, it's impossible to turn down a role like Real Madrid, but I mean,
Hmm.
I absolutely love that Inter team, and yeah, I think that's probably my favorite ever Mourinho side.
Yeah, fair. I think that's the iconic one kind of for me as well because of the Champions League defeating Barca, who at the time were near impossible to defeat. I'd say they were that exceptional under Pep Guardiola, and for them to have done it and win the treble as well, I thought they were really exceptional. And that was peak Jose, the arrogance, the swagger. He spoke before about him being a different person. I think the what did he say? He said when he came back to maybe it was Tottenham or United, he said he was the happy one now. But like I feel like that persona, that whole I'm the
Mhm.
chosen one, has kind of faded. Like that was back when he used to come into press conferences and like you could either hate him or love him because he was just so in your face, but he backed it up. And I actually used to, I still do, but not as much now. I used to love listening to his interviews and his articles because
Yeah.
he's got so much knowledge to share as well, along with the prickly side to his demeanor with the media. So yeah, that's a good choice. Mycon as well is a very good choice. I forgot about Mycon.
I don't necessarily think that it's faded, but I do think that like the aura is faded and that he's just
Mm.
not backing his swagger and confidence up with results. Um, I was actually listening to a interview that he did in Portuguese like a year ago when Tottenham were like top of the table for a few weeks.
Hmm.
And you saw like a bit of that swagger back now that Spurs were, and he was saying something like, um, let's see if I can translate it. He's saying basically like, uh, the people of Tottenham are not used to being atop the table, but I'm used to it. And
Yeah,
saying
right.
something like, possession like is this story of possession is more for the philosophers of football than for me. Like, you've
All
never heard
right.
me like we lost the game, but we had more possession.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I absolutely loved his confidence and swagger in the interviews. I guess he still has that
Yeah.
to a degree, but it like you like it's faded a bit. It's just hard to take that, as seriously when it like, continues to disappoint.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think the best managers often have very interesting characters. I think loads of managers do. But when you're right, if I play a lot of FIFA with my friends and I give a lot of chat about FIFA with my friends as well. And if I keep getting beaten 6-0, then then the credibility of what I'm saying doesn't really stand up at all. I'm not saying obviously Mourinho's getting beaten 6-0 every week, but the sentiment's still there. There's only so much you need to see results. You need to see that kind of shift. Um,
Mhm,
and I feel like the game is always moving so quickly. There's always new managers, always new ideas. That sometimes when you're someone like Mourinho that changed the game, you touched on it earlier, that changed the game exceptionally. I've read quite a few books in terms of the tactical periodization that he did, and I remember because I was old enough to remember that when Chelsea came to when he came to Chelsea, because I was an Arsenal fan and we had gone unbeaten, and I was a kid then, and I believed that Arsenal would rule for an eternity. And he really, I think, for him to have grappled that title the way they did, coming from Porto in itself, I think with 95 points, I believe that they conceded something like 14 goals all season. Like, I thought that was an exceptional achievement. And then he carried that on. It wasn't just that, it was year after year after year of just strangulating any opponent that came towards him with any group of players. So yeah, he's definitely done a lot for football. But yeah, I do think at the point about man management of players has definitely changed. I've heard a lot of managers, not just Mourinho. I've heard managers like Arsene Wenger talk about it, Pep Guardiola, of the hairdryer public treatment of players. I think jury's out on it. When you're talking 2004, 2005, that type of player probably doesn't exist mentally now. I'm not saying that there's a difference mentally in terms of strength or whatever between players of those eras, but they're completely different in terms of how they are, who they are, because of the time that's passed. And I think the Luke Shaw treatment, and I think when they lost in the Europa Conference, he said that he didn't want any of the squad. I don't know if that works as much in modern football, but obviously Mourinho is the expert, not myself. The final question, not one of the final questions, final one on Mourinho, the main big one is,
yeah,
can he get back to that level? And I feel like the answer is going to be no, but I think I've alluded to a few times. I said to a few friends that David Moyes, when he took the West Ham job, one guy's a West Ham fan. I said he's never gonna do anything for West Ham. West Ham are going to get relegated.
right.
Obviously, now I'm in trouble. I'm in a lot of trouble, and it's like, can Mourinho have that renaissance that someone like Moyes has had?
It's a great question. We just published a very good article on David Moyes, the Moyesian revolution at West Ham. Um, it's a tough one. I mean, I think that Moyes, part of what I think has played into his revival is like learning from his failures, taking some time away from football. And we saw that after his time at Real Sociedad as well as
Hmm.
West Ham. Taking some time learning from his failures, accepting that, and perhaps improving as coach. That's one thing that I think that that Mourinho is missing. You know,
Mm.
and I think that I feel like he's a bit too stuck in his ways. I mean, obviously, you can never say never, and uh, Jose Mourinho's reputation as a manager is a lot. How do I say this? His reputation is a lot more stronger than his managerial ability right now. So
Hmm.
you want to keep getting jobs, but maybe it's not always the wise decision to accept that job. Maybe you take a step away. Maybe you decide to, I don't know, go into international or go to a smaller job with where you would have less funds but more authority. I think that would be something that I'd like to see. But in general, I mean, you're talking about that hair dryer treatment. Like that's another thing where I feel like um is just another reason why Mourinho is so outdated as a manager. I mean, we saw that after the Bodo Glimt game, right? Just like hanging out guys like uh, Brian Reynolds, uh, trying to see what else. Borja Mayoral, I think, was another one.
Hmm.
Um, Marash Kumbula, and it's like, okay, sure, they didn't play great, but like, they're still members of your squad, and you're gonna need them. Okay, so I don't get what the end product of hanging those guys out to dry. To be honest with you. especially when they're barely play. Like they're playing Europa Conference League, which obviously isn't as important as Serie A. Um, and yeah, I think that's one of the things that about Mourinho. The lack of accountability. He takes so little accountability. He either blames the journalists, he either blames the refs, he either blames his bench players. He never blames himself.
Mm,
And so like I'm sure that if Mourinho put as much effort into changing his ways and like looking into the mirror and seeing how that he can improve as his brainless Twitter soldiers do into defending his reputation and like spamming people's timelines like, oh man, this guy's the greatest guy to ever live, how dare you criticize Mourinho.
mm.
Like he might actually be doing well at Roma. He isn't right now, okay? Um, and like, the lack of accountability. That's just the biggest thing for me. I mean, complaining after I think it was the draw against Bodo Glimt. I'm not too sure, but like saying that that the squad of Roma is not better than last year, and like Bruno Perez and Juan Jesus like are needed. Like, what? Are you kidding me?
Mm.
Bruno Perez and Juan Jesus. Like two, with all due respect, two, incredibly average um players. Juan Jesus is a backup at Napoli. Bruno Perez, like I guess he's playing regularly at Trabzonspor. I don't know. I don't follow the Turkish league. Um, like two players who did very little at Roma, to be honest. And like, okay, if you thought they were worth keeping, you could have literally told the Roma upper management, renew these guys' contracts. So I mean, once again, Mourinho blaming everybody except for himself. He could have easily kept those two guys, but frankly, Bruno Perez and Juan Jesus are not preventing Roma from getting into the top four.
Yeah. I'm laughing because yeah, it doesn't surprise me they'd have those comments, and I think accountability is a big thing. There's also that element, right, with managers where I feel like you never fully know the truth. Like you would have thought Mourinho would have some form of accountability, but via the press, you don't see that. You don't really see even potential change in terms of the way his teams are. Tottenham were quite devoid of a specific style. United were drab. Um, Roma, I've only caught glimpses of Roma, haven't looked great. And it's just a case of like, what is it that you're trying to do? As you mentioned before about managers improving and adapting, and that hypothesis I threw at you before, and managers only lasting roughly a decade. I think Sir Alex Ferguson is testament to that because the adaptability was always there. He was constantly adapting and changing from coaching in the 80s all the way to the 2000s. And Mourinho, I don't quite see that. Maybe it does exist behind the scenes. I know he changed his coaching staff a lot when he came to Tottenham. That was meant to be a thing, but yeah, I haven't seen that so far. So yeah, I'm not sure if we'll be seeing that renaissance, and I will check out that Moyes article because I'm a big fan of you guys. But yeah, one of the another questions I have as well is
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions about the quality of obviously of Nigerian, which I've alluded to a few times. About my guy, if I could ever meet him, it'd be great. But unfortunately, I can't. Is Victor Onishem? I know he's turning up the Syria this season, and he's a big hope for me as a Nigerian fan for the World Cup. But how good has he been this season?
Yeah, I've been following Oshiman for quite a while, and yeah, I think that he is really reaching or approaching a world class level. I mean, absolutely so effective. You saw that um in Nigeria's previous match against I think it was Liberia, right?
Mm, yeah,
Where
correct.
two goals, two penalties, and had a pretty darn good performance. Um, pretty pretty good performance as well. Today against Cape Verde. So I've always thought that he was going to be really big. As a player, I think he's constantly improving under Luciano Spalletti. See that with his hold up play, with his quickness, so lethal. Um, and I think that. I think that he's showing, in my opinion, that he's uh, the best striker in Serie A. I think it's probably right now. So I'd probably say it's between him and Dusan Vlahovic. I personally like Osimhen's game more, but
Mhm.
uh, but yeah, he's absolutely massive. I've been talking about him since his time in Belgium, and I think he has really everything it takes to be a world class player.
Good, because yeah, I've mentioned in quite a few of my group chats, and no one has any time to listen to me. I think I started singing the praises of Alex Iwobi, who I still do like as a player, but unfortunately, because he hasn't done as well at Everton, people are unwilling to listen on my guy Victor. So thanks, thanks for sharing some light on that. So when we're talking about we'll switch back to Mourinho. So obviously we discussed obviously his career, his ups and downs, whether he'll get back to that level. I kind of want to touch on obviously Portugal going into the playoffs. And do you think that's something which we could see? I know that obviously it's middle of the season. Do you think international ball would be next for Jose? I kind of feel like there are a lot of managers the international manager scene isn't, I wouldn't say, as strong as the club level scene. Obviously, for a variety of reasons, managers are always deemed as addicts. Therefore, they want to be doing the day to day. I look at Gareth Southgate, love Gareth Southgate, won't criticize him that much, but in terms of caliber of manager, I wouldn't say he would be anywhere near the top. Uh, Probably all of the coaches in the Premier League. That might sound harsh, but that's kind of how I'd view it from his limited time at coaching. Could you see Mourinho taking over the Portuguese job if it doesn't go well for Portugal in the playoffs?
I really hope not.
Oh, well, okay, fine.
But look, I mean, I think that international management is something that Mourinho should consider. Um, I think that his tactics would probably work better in international football than club football. International football, I think there's a greater emphasis on keeping things tight at the back, having a decent organization, and obviously, with the man management aspect, with you if you're Mourinho, you don't have to necessarily like call out players publicly, even though he probably would.
Yeah.
You can just not call them up next month, so
Mm.
that's one aspect. And I do think that it's a possibility for him. I'm not sure if he has the humility for it though, to step down from club football, and I think that many would consider it a step down, um, and throw his hat into the ring for international football. I'm not sure. I think his ego might be too high for it. So I do, but as far as whether it's the right move for him, I definitely do think that it's something he should consider. I just hope and pray that he goes nowhere near the Portugal job. Portugal needs a manager who is attack minded, who's willing to change things up, who's capable of working with young players and finding the right system. For me, none of those requirements are. I just feel like Mourinho couldn't be a worse option. I would honestly rather like. I'm not gonna say I'd rather have like another year of Fernando Santos over Mourinho, but it's pretty close to be honest with you. I mean, people like I think that people when talking about Mourinho, they think too much about his previous achievements than what he's actually doing right now.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with that.
Frankly, I can name at least 5 Portuguese managers who would be better fits for the Portugal job than Jose Mourinho. Um, and that's not me being a hater. That's just me being just realistic and truthful. I don't see how you can look at what Fernando Santos has done over the past 3 years and think, you know what Portugal need? Jose Mourinho. Like that is just for me. That is just like picking the biggest name out of the bunch and like just thinking, that's it. You know.
Yeah,
So I would I like I said, I hope and pray every single day that that it's not gonna happen. One of the guys I went to the Portugal Serbia game with, Matthew Marshall. He had as he is telling me that he thinks that the Portuguese Federation will appoint him after Santos. Me personally, I don't think it will happen, but like I said, anything can happen in football.
Yeah, that is very true. And what the question I was alluding to, but you kind of half answered it, is who's on your shopping list then for the Portuguese manager job? It sounds as if you've given it some time and thought.
Look, Ruben Amorim and Sergio Conceição, I don't think either of those guys would leave their position um, as manager of Sporting and Porto, respectively. So yeah, I don't think either of those are options. Um, I do think there are some league managers in the league that would probably leave it, such as guys like Carlos Carvalhal or João Pedro Sousa. Um, so in terms of managers, I'm thinking. I mean, Luis Castro, I think is one. Um, yeah, Luis Castro, I believe he's without a club right now. Um, Rui George, I think, is one as well, um, who is currently the Portugal U21 manager and has done pretty darn well. Um, Vitor Pereira, I think, is there are reports that he's set to leave his job at Fenerbahce. So I'm not sure if that's true, but he's somebody who's definitely an option. Um, I actually got to speak to Andre Villas-Boas a few weeks ago in an exclusive Breaking Lines interview, and he did tell me off the record that he told me that for the interview that he definitely sees himself coaching in an international team one day. So I
Hmm.
think that ABB is an option. Um, Leonardo Jardim, I think is one. Who's I don't think Jardim is coaching right now. He may be coaching a Qatari team. I'm not sure, but um, or no, he's currently coaching a Saudi team. Okay, but there are a lot of options. Okay, Luis Castro, Villas Boas. There are a lot of options. I think. Um, Maybe even like Abel Ferreira if he leaves his job as Palmeiras manager. You know, managers in Brazil like really only spend so long
Yeah.
at one club. Paulo Fonseca currently unavailable. Um, and even like George Jesus, I don't I would not he would not be at the top of my list, but he's another option if he does. I think there's a good chance if Benfica go trophyless this season like they did last season, there's probably a good chance that he leaves. So,
Hmm.
there are plenty of options. I'm not 100% sure like who would be my number one option to be honest with you, and that is one thing where like when I talk to Portuguese people who like who justify why they think Fernando Santos should stay, they say like, "Oh, there's no like real one option." And like, okay, there's maybe no real like clear cut like, oh my god, this guy is like the only guy you need to consider. Um like fair enough. Okay, there's no option that's like necessarily better than the others. Um but there are a lot of options. So I mean to say that like Portugal should stick with Santos because there's no one option. Like for me that is such lazy thinking. There are plenty of options. There are plenty of Portuguese managers who I'm sure would accept that job. I don't think Santos leaves before the playoff. Unfortunately, I think it would be definitely an ideal time to get in a new manager considering the break. But with that being said, I can see the point that maybe some coach thinking that, look, if Portugal lose in the playoffs, then I'm going to be sacked. I can definitely see that point. But Um, I think that if it was up for me, I would try to find a replacement who'd take on that challenge. Um, I frankly just don't see any point in keeping Santos in charge, because even if Portugal do make it into the World Cup, which is hardly a gimme, um, you know what they're gonna do. Anybody who's watched them for the past 3 years knows what they're gonna do.
Yeah, yeah, it was a long list, a long list without your favorite item selected, and I think kind of shows. I think international management is actually quite hard to really definitively say who should take over. I know that Flick was kind of shoehorned for the Germany job, but it's not often that clear cut. I think England, for example, scrambled around after the Allardyce issue. We're like, okay, hey, let's give it to Southgate. Oh, he's actually not too bad. It's gone really well. Obviously, Deschamps has been in the French job for a very long time, but international ball's got like a different set of requirements, kind
Yeah.
of like because club ball is like very much about the board and the philosophy they want to do, but international ball is kind of different because you need to analyze, okay, who's coming through. There are players that get international caps at all sorts of ages. Different managers you select will select different players. Have you got a really good youth team that's coming through? Are you going to stick to your golden generation? Are you a Belgium where you got all these stars and you're like, okay, we need someone kind of now that's going to gel them all together? And it's kind of a weird process because you're right. You mentioned with some of the Portugal guests, guest candidates, would they leave their club jobs? You got this long shopping list, but the top five items are all sold out, so to speak. So it's a tricky one to kind of navigate. But I think we'll kind of end it on there, Zach. So I have to really appreciate you coming on. As I said, if you guys haven't been on Breaking the Lines and check them out on Twitter as well, they're very, very active. I'm a big fan of theirs, and keep the Nigeria articles coming as well. And any positive Arsenal articles, any negative ones, I'm gonna stay away from because it'll make me a bit too sad. And to be honest, a negative Arsenal article is always around the corner because we like to throw up some terrible performances. So thank you for that. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next week.